All right, so let's dive right in. Today we're looking at something a little bit unexpected.
Yeah.
Donald Trump's take on nuclear weapons
Hmm.
and global security.
Mm.
And, we've got kind of a fascinating mix of sources here for this deep dive.
Right.
We've got a Fox News interview transcript,
Okay.
an article from the Daily Mail, and another from the Express.
Interesting.
And what's striking is that Trump, who's often been seen as, kind of a hawkish figure
Yeah.
on foreign policy, he's really sounding the alarm about nuclear proliferation
It is intriguing.
and the dangers it poses.
Yeah, he's painting a pretty bleak picture.
Oh, yeah.
Going as far as to say that the use of these weapons would likely mean the end of the world.
He really didn't hold back.
No.
In that Fox interview, he said, and I'm quoting here, "The level of destruction is beyond anything you can imagine.
Wow.
It's just bad that you have to spend all this money on something that, if it's used, it's probably the end of the world."
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty stark warning,
It is.
especially coming from him.
Yeah. This statement is really a significant departure from his past rhetoric on military power. His fire and fury stance on North Korea.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder what's driving this shift in his thinking.
Yeah.
Is it a genuine change of heart, or is there, some kind of strategic calculation behind it?
Yeah, what's he trying to do here?
Exactly.
And it's not just about, the sheer destructive power of nuclear weapons.
Right.
He goes on to compare the nuclear threat to climate change, arguing that nuclear war is a more immediate existential threat.
Right.
He even mentions, how Biden's always talking about climate change being the greatest threat we face.
Yeah.
So is he right about this?
Well,
I mean, how do these threats actually compare?
that's a really complex issue.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that nuclear weapons have the potential to cause unimaginable devastation in a very short time frame.
Right.
But climate change is this kind of slow-burning crisis with potentially catastrophic long-term consequences.
Yeah.
So it's not a simple either scenario.
No.
They both pose severe threats,
Yeah.
but on vastly different timescales.
Okay, so we've got Trump, sounding the alarm about nuclear war.
Right.
But here's where things get really interesting. He's saying he wants to reopen arms control talks with Russia and China.
Okay.
He even said, there's no reason for us to be building brand new nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
We already have so many you could destroy the world 50 times over, 100 times over.
Wow.
And here we are building new nuclear weapons, and they're building nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
So, is he serious about disarmament? Could this actually lead to something?
Well, I think the desire to reduce nuclear arsenals is understandable.
Sure.
But the geopolitical realities are far more complicated.
Right.
I mean, to really understand the feasibility of these talks,
Yeah.
we need to consider several factors. Historically, arms control negotiations have been incredibly difficult and lengthy processes.
They have.
And that's just the start.
Yeah, and let's not forget about the current global climate. Our sources highlight some pretty unsettling figures here.
Yeah.
Russia has almost 5,600 nuclear warheads.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. falls with over 5,100, and China's arsenal is growing rapidly.
Yeah.
I mean, with all this tension simmering, can meaningful disarmament talks even happen?
It's certainly a challenge. And, the concept of nuclear deterrence,
Yeah.
which relies on the fear of retaliation to prevent the actual use of these weapons,
Yeah.
that's been a key factor in avoiding a major nuclear conflict so far.
Right. Right.
But as these arsenals grow and distrust deepens,
Yeah.
that risk of miscalculation or escalation just increases.
Yeah, it feels like we're sitting on a powder keg here.
It does. And, on top of that, you've got the reactions from other world leaders,
Yeah.
which range from cautious to, frankly, alarming.
Yeah, the Daily Mail article highlights how some European leaders, like French President Macron,
Yeah.
they're open to discussing, expanded nuclear protection for European allies.
Right.
But on the other hand, you have figures like Poland's Prime Minister Tusk, who's expressing a desire for their own countries to actually possess nuclear weapons.
Wow.
And then you've got German Chancellor-in-waiting Merz,
Yeah.
who's interested in exploring these nuclear weapons, sharing talks with France and Britain.
All right.
I mean, it feels like things could spiral out of control pretty quickly.
Absolutely. These reactions really underscore the anxiety and the uncertainty that Trump's statements have kind of sparked on the world stage.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that, any discussion about nuclear weapons,
Yeah.
it has ripple effects far beyond U.S. borders.
And then, of course, there's Iran, adding yet another layer of complexity to this already tangled web.
Right. Well, Trump did mention the Golden Dome in Iran as a potential target during that Fox News interview.
Uh-huh.
He also emphasized his preference for a negotiated settlement that prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons.
Right.
He even sent a letter to Iran's leadership urging negotiation, but also warning of potential military consequences if they refuse.
So he's dangling both a carrot and a stick. But how realistic is it to expect a deal with Iran at this point?
Well,
And what are the risks if those negotiations fail?
the Iran nuclear issue is incredibly complex and fraught with historical baggage.
For sure.
There's certainly potential for diplomacy,
Yeah.
but it's going to require careful maneuvering and a willingness to compromise from all sides.
Okay.
The risks of failure are significant,
Yeah.
potentially leading to further instability in the region
Right.
and even military conflict.
Yeah. It's a very precarious situation.
It is.
So we're seeing all these different reactions, these anxieties bubbling up in response to Trump's words.
Right.
But why is this the moment that's causing such a stir?
Yeah.
I mean, the threat of nuclear war isn't exactly new, is it?
Well, that's true. Nuclear weapons have been this kind of looming threat for decades.
Yeah.
But there are a few factors converging right now that I think make this moment particularly unsettling.
Like what?
First, you have this breakdown of traditional arms control agreements.
Yeah.
And this erosion of trust between these nuclear armed states.
Yeah. We're seeing that play out in real time with Russia and China.
Right?
They're both pushing back against the U.S., asserting themselves on the world stage.
Exactly. Russia's actions in Ukraine, China's growing military assertiveness in the Pacific.
Right.
All of this has heightened global tensions considerably.
Yeah.
And when you combine that with the modernization and expansion of nuclear arsenals, it creates a very volatile mix.
It feels like the old rules don't apply anymore.
Yeah.
And nobody's quite sure what the new ones are.
That's a good way to put it. The old Cold War framework of deterrence,
right,
which relied on this balance of power between two superpowers, it's just no longer sufficient in this multipolar world with multiple nuclear-armed states.
Yeah.
And that uncertainty is breeding fear and instability.
And fear often leads to unpredictable behavior, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, some countries might feel pressured to develop their own nuclear weapons for self-defense.
Exactly.
Even if it ultimately makes everyone less safe.
That's the danger of this security dilemma we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
When one country perceives a threat and takes steps to bolster its own security, it can inadvertently make other countries feel less secure, leading them to take their own countermeasures.
Yeah.
It's a vicious cycle that can spiral out of control.
So how do we break that cycle?
Right.
I mean, Trump's talking about disarmament. But is that even remotely realistic in this climate?
It's certainly a long shot.
Yeah.
But even if complete disarmament isn't achievable in the short term, there's still steps that can be taken. To reduce risks and build trust.
Like what?
One crucial step, I think, would be to re-engage in dialogue and diplomacy.
But can we really expect meaningful dialogue when there's so much distrust and animosity between these countries?
It won't be easy, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it's essential to start somewhere.
Okay.
Communication channels need to be reopened. Confidence-building measures need to be put in place.
Okay.
Even small steps.
Yeah.
Like resuming inspections of nuclear facilities or agreeing to limits on certain types of weapons development.
Right.
These things could help to ease tensions and prevent miscalculations.
So instead of focusing on eliminating nuclear weapons entirely, maybe the more pragmatic approach is to manage the risks and prevent their use.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're living in a world where these weapons exist.
Yeah.
And finding ways to coexist with them as safely as possible.
So it sounds like we're walking a tightrope here.
Yeah.
Managing this threat, navigating these complex relationships, trying to prevent things from going nuclear, literally.
Yeah.
What does all of this mean for us?
Yeah.
For like the average person trying to make sense of this precarious situation?
It's easy to feel powerless.
Yeah.
In the face of such a massive existential threat.
I mean, is there anything we can even do? What can we do about it? Is there any point in even worrying about something that feels so far beyond our control?
I understand that feeling of helplessness.
Yeah.
But I firmly believe that awareness is the first step towards action.
Okay.
We need to be informed about the risks.
Okay.
Understand the complexities of nuclear policy.
Yeah.
And really engage in a constructive dialogue about potential solutions.
So you're saying we shouldn't just bury our heads in the sand and hope for the best?
Precisely. We need to push past that feeling of discomfort.
Okay.
And really engage with this issue.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we engage?
Well, I think you start by learning more about the history of nuclear weapons.
Okay.
Current arms control efforts, and just the different perspectives on disarmament and deterrence.
Okay.
I mean, there are countless resources available.
Like what kind of resources?
Books, articles, documentaries.
Yeah.
Even podcasts like this one.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
So educate ourselves. Don't be afraid to have those tough conversations, even if they're uncomfortable.
Exactly. Talk to your friends, family, colleagues.
Yeah.
Share what you've learned, express your concerns, and encourage others to become more informed.
Okay.
The more we talk about these issues, the more they'll stay on the public agenda.
And you know when enough people care.
Right.
It puts pressure on those in power to take action.
Exactly.
We've seen that with other social movements.
It's true. Public opinion can be a powerful force for change.
Okay.
Don't underestimate the impact of making your voice heard.
So what can we actually do? Like, what are some concrete steps?
Contact your elected representatives.
Okay.
Support organizations working on nuclear disarmament and arms control. Participate in peaceful protests and demonstrations.
So basically get involved.
Yes, make your voice heard.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even in the face of these seemingly insurmountable challenges, we can make a difference.
Absolutely. And on that note, let me leave you with this final thought.
Okay.
This isn't about blind optimism or ignoring the very real dangers that we face.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that even small actions taken collectively can have a ripple effect.
Yeah, I like that.
We have a shared responsibility to protect our planet and future generations from the threat of nuclear war.
It's a big one.
It is. Let's not wait for a crisis to act.
Yeah.
The time to engage is now.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.
Yeah.
And remember, knowledge is power.
It is.
And in this case, it could be the key to our survival.